When you become a manager, one of the more subtle transitions that you need to be aware of is that the flow of information to you is going to be different than when you were an individual contributor. In short, people are going to filter the things they tell you. And if you don't pick up on this, if you don't realize this, believe this, pretty soon or over time, you're going to become separated from reality, what's really going on with the team. In this video, I'll show you the things to be aware of, to watch for, and how to mitigate some of the effects of being isolated from what's really going on when you take that next step to become a manager. Okay, you're a manager now. You've been promoted in the company that you work, or maybe you've changed companies and you're coming in as a manager. What's the difference now? You have authority over people. And although you may not have got your head around what you need to do differently, really appreciated what it means to be a manager, to be a leader in the organization, the people that are working in your team are looking at you a little bit differently, like an authority figure, someone that has control over them. So what happens? People act differently around you. They change their behavior because you're a manager. If you know people, if you are managing people that you used to work with, it's not going to be a big change right up front, but it will evolve in a fairly short period of time. Because think of it, now you're responsible for pushing work their way, evaluating how well they do, doing the evaluations, mid-year, end of the year reviews. You're in control of compensation, their pay, a lot of things that you weren't before. So it's natural that people are going to become a little bit more, let's say, cautious around you, and not necessarily cautious in a scared sense, but they are going to pay attention to the way they interact with you. They're going to calculate risk differently. Whereas you might be used to having pretty open communication with your coworkers, friends, colleagues, when you're all at the same level, people will start to think about how and what they're going to say to you now that you're the manager. And this may be a little bit of a surprise to you because maybe you think because you're a manager now, you'll have better visibility. You'll be able to affect the team in a lot better ways because you know a lot more about what's going on. Now, that's partially true. And in one sense, you will know what the organization's goals are or kind of the behind the scenes working of the organization itself. You probably will know that kind of stuff better. What you'll start to be a little bit more distance from is what the individuals are experiencing in your team every day. But you have to kind of mentally get your head around, there's going to be a little bit of distance that starts to be created. And this is something that's going to continue for the rest of your leadership career. If you go from manager to director on up, in fact, the higher you go, the more potential there is for separation with your people. Not only are you like physically separated from them, but the information that is making its way towards you is going through different levels of filtering. So over time, it's something you have to be even more attentive to. So why do people do this? Why can't everybody just say what's going on all the time? And, some of your best team members will be very good at this, but they're going to need you to set the tone to ensure that this does happen. And it's probably not going to be that way right out of the gates. You're going to have to work at that a little bit. So why do people filter and modify, alter the message when they bring it to you? They're not just interested in conveying raw information. They're also concerned with how it's going to affect them or their safety in the workplace. In safety, we're not talking about physical safety. We're talking about like my predictability about what comes next for me. Am I going to be able to maintain what I have right now? So this is a thought process people are going to go through when they're talking to you. Now, it may be, there's going to be different degrees of it. Some people are going to take this a little bit more seriously, be a little bit more on guard until they get to know you a little bit more. And by the way, it's a two-way street. You have to, and I'll talk about this a little bit, you have to do things that assure your people that it's okay to give you the raw information or the unvarnished truth. But people are going to think about what they're going to say before they say it. So that might be the biggest difference. One way to look at it, they're gonna simplify messages for you. Now, this is where the line gets a little bit blurred between telling the unvarnished black and white truth. And now that I'm thinking about it a little bit, what is the best way to actually get that across and still save myself? And not just save myself, but I'm going to be concerned with how I'm perceived by the rest of the team, the way I'm interacting with you as the manager. Nobody's ever going to deliberately make themselves look incompetent. So until you really establish that bond with your people, they're not going to know that if they bring you bad news or maybe something that they didn't do as well as they should have, are you going to embarrass them? Are they going to look bad in front of their peers, which is extremely damaging to the relationship? They're looking to establish a relationship with you that's secure, so they want you to think the best of them. That is going to influence the type of information they bring to you. And then one option people always have is just to remain silent. So you definitely don't want that. So you have to really proactively go after information. And the way I like to think of it is kind of pull the information out of people that you need. And it's important to not see this communication dynamic as dishonesty or deception or people are trying to mislead you. It's not. It's just the natural forces at work, things that have to do with our personalities and our beliefs and how we should be treated at work. It's just a normal response to hierarchy, and you're one level up as the manager. Let's talk about bad news a little bit more detail here. The more senior you become, the more costly it's going to be for people to bring bad news. So what happens? People will spend time. So what's going to happen? People will spend a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to bring you bad news. And if you think about it, we all do this in some way, shape, or form. You don't want to be dramatic. You don't want to just charge in there and just give some sort of doom and gloom overview of the situation. Maybe you lost a customer or you have a project going over budget, or it could be anything. You're going to think of a way to communicate that, not only tactfully, but accurately, but also in a way that protects you. And while that can be even the most efficient way to communicate information, it loses something, right? It loses some of the detail, some of the emotion probably is stripped out of it. So the important thing for you on the other side of the table as the manager is to realize the information that people are bringing to you is just a little bit different. So it's going to have to be a two-way communication. It can't just be one way to you. And it's a good assumption for you to think that whatever you're hearing is just a little bit cleaner or sanitized than what's really going on. Now, you're going to have some people that are just dramatic, and you'll get a feel for those people right off the bat, the ones that bring you maybe even the worst version of what's going on. I think those are a little bit easier to detect. What's harder is the people that you really trust, the people that do a good job, is deciphering when the information is sanitized or lacks the real details that you need. And one of the real dangers here, and this is even as the higher up you go, the worse it becomes, but a clean presentation, a clean communication, you don't want to just take it for granted and think that everything is good or stable just because that's what I'm hearing. That's probably the most important thing. And over time, a lot of these little distortions to the story add up. And then pretty soon, if you're not staying in close contact with your people, you're in just a different world than they are. If you read history, philosophy, you'll hear a lot about this. Machiavelli, The Prince, is a great book to read, to start to think about the fact that, what you and I are dealing with is nothing new. Machiavelli in The Prince, he warns about flatterers or the courtiers, people who maybe make a good living by being the ones that are close to leaders. And the reason they've been able to remain close is because they've established some sort of bond based on, in The Prince would tell you that it's flattery. So you have to be on guard to make sure that you're not being flattered by certain people. And at the same time, you have to realize that a certain element or a certain amount of that is always going to happen. So you need to control how you react to it and not be pulled in. Because over time, there are going to be fewer and fewer people, the more senior you get, that are really willing to bring you the unvarnished truth of what's really going on. The bad news, think of it. So you have people that are maybe a little too familiar with you, spending too much time hanging around you, telling you what you want to hear. You've got the small distortions to what's really going on. And then you have silence. So you have to pay attention to who on the team is not communicating enough to you. Maybe it's not total silence, but you have to be aware of the people that are actively working, experiencing things. However, they're not bringing information to you on what's going on. Because in all of those cases, disagreeing with you is risky. Even if people get to know you, even if you're a fair leader, people are going to assess that it's as some level of risk to bring you things they know you don't want to hear. Or let's not say things you don't want to hear, but news that is going to be disappointing, or it's going to be a negative situation. And you have to be careful over time. Be realistic. When we go into work, it takes a lot to discipline yourself to go after what's going wrong so you can address it and get it back on track. It's much easier to slip into a habit of receiving good news and, day after day, everything is looking up. But with the communication dynamics in play that we're talking about here and the message being distorted at each level that you go up, you're going to eventually become disconnected from reality. So you might ask yourself, well, what's the big deal with that? Because people are doing what they do. I'm getting enough information and enough the right level of quality that suits me. One of the problems that's going to eventually become apparent is if you don't really know what people are dealing with on a daily basis, you can't help them. And eventually, if you can't help people with their problems because you're just not seeing the situation the way they are, they're going to lose respect for you. They're going to stop relying on you. You really cease to be a leader, and you may be just pure management to them. And when I say management, you're just part of the apparatus that ensures work is completed. You're not really the one that people look to for inspiration on how to achieve the vision for the team in the future. Only people that are really maintain a good, solid connection with what's really going on are going to have that sort of respect from the people. Underlying all of what we're talking about here, you've heard the term psychological safety. And psychological safety is not being nice to people. It's not having cookouts. It's not, giving people extra benefits. What psychological safety is, and people feel like they can say what they're seeing. They can speak freely. They can contribute. They can bring their whole self to work because they can use all of their talents really at any time without fear of retribution. So you can see that if the reactions are too harsh, if bad news is not welcome, people will put more effort into editing the messages that they push up to you. More so, they'll put more effort into that than just trying to convey reality. Because reality, what you're showing them is it's not safe to do that. There's going to be some sort of repercussion for them. One way to think of it is the way you lead and the way you interact with people, you're really giving them permission to speak to you in a certain way. And you don't want to be the type of leader that is giving people permission to speak to you in a very scripted way. So that a lot of times we incentivize that when we react harshly to a message. What you want to do is you want to set a tone that tells people, I'm approachable. And the way you solidify that is in the way you react to bad news. It has to be very even keeled and accepting of the information. Doesn't mean you need to be accepting of how we got there. Maybe people did make mistakes, but you gotta welcome the information so that you can work on it. Because if you don't do this, then silence becomes the safer option across the board. And once people are silent, you're just answering your own questions. You're just in some sort of cyclical loop reinforcing what you already believe. And the team is not going to improve because you're not getting any of the benefit from the people that are out there doing work, interacting with customers on the shop floor, whatever the case may be. One way to think of it is when people trust you, that really lowers the friction that exists in deciding what to communicate up the chain of command. So it reduces the friction. It lubricates the flow of good information coming to you. And that means you're going to hear some bad news. You're going to maybe hear more bad news. But the point is You're going to hear it sooner. You're going to hear it more accurately. So thus you can correct things sooner where it's less costly. And you can come up with policies that talk about transparency and wanting to hear bad news, but it's really a learned behavior for people to stay silent. They're going to learn by your reaction whether or not they can actually bring you the bad news. One of the reactions that you really have to be careful, it's not as obvious as yelling at people for bringing you bad news. You got to really watch sarcasm, because sarcasm may actually be more damaging to your relationship with people, because people are more likely to be embarrassed by a sarcastic comment. Not only does it make you look immature and unprofessional, but you never know how somebody's going to take that. You may just think it's a funny little comment you're making. Somebody could really take that to heart and really be pissed at you for a long time. They may never forgive you. So however you respond in a repeated way is what people are going to shape their communication method upon. The key word being repeated. And the bottom line is, if you're calm leaders are going to have the better view of what's going on. Now, a lot of times we would equate calmness in a leader as being passive or uninvolved or unwilling to confront issues. That's not the calmness I'm talking about. A calm leader is one that people feel relaxed around and in the good ways. So they can work, like they can bring their whole full self to work. They can say what they're seeing. They can say what they're feeling and thinking, because their leader is going to accept that information and use it for what it's worth. Now, you may have to take action on what you're hearing. People realize that. And that's part of treating people like they're professional and adults, is to trust that they know that it is possible that they bring you information that you welcome and bring in, but that is also a reflection of something they did not do correctly. And they will expect to be held accountable for that if they're professional, which it's always best to treat people like they are. A lot of new leaders get into this trap where you think that I can't really trust people entirely because they're always trying to get over. And even if you don't think of it in terms of people trying to get over on you, if you're anxious, anxiety is the cause of micromanagement. It's really a security issue with people where they feel like they have to exert control where it's really not appropriate. And if you've been around people who are anxious like that, it's hard to describe them as calm. Now, you can be around people who are anxious who are very nice, but that's not the same thing. Nice and calm are not the same thing. Think of calm as behaving in a way that facilitates transparency. And if you want to define transparency would be that what is being seen, what is being talked about, decided, is very close to reality. That's probably a good usable definition of transparency. So maybe this is an area of concern for you, that you have a problem being calm. If you can lean into it, if you can try it, what I think you're going to find is that the amount of good information coming your way is going to go up exponentially. And you'll be in a better position to really help the team, and you'll be a lot better at achieving the goals. And lastly, you have to have an outlook that you have to go after the information you want for all the reasons that I talked about. And people are going to filter what they're bringing to you. Even, if it was theoretically possible to be the perfect leader, people will still filter information a little bit. So you want to be the type of person that actively goes after the information you need. You don't wait for it to be brought to you, which is a problem with a lot of new leaders. Is they kind of think, because I have this title now, that the information is just going to show up at my doorstep, when it is not going to be that way. Always better to assume that there's going to be some sort of distortion of the information, and there's also going to be information that's held back. So go spend your time around your people, talk to them, and ask leading questions. And a leading question is one where you don't ask something in a way where it can be answered simply by a yes or a no. So a good example would be, Tell me how the quality program is coming along. And then somebody says how they think it's coming along. And then you ask another follow-up question. Well, what would make it a little easier to do this aspect of it? Now, contrast that with you show up down on the shop floor and you say something like, it looks like things are going a lot better. Is that right? Somebody's just going to say yes or no. They may go into a little bit more detail, but you're really asking them to make that leap on their own. Whereas when you ask leading questions, or what's called use a Socratic method, then the question itself is a request for an explanation and people's ideas and people's input. And people like answering those questions more anyway. So you're going to go after the information, but you're also going to set a tone, create a climate where you have not only hard processes that facilitate the flow of information, but you actually want to incentivize people to bring information forward. And the way you do that is you reward honesty. What do I mean by rewarding honesty? Because it seems like an obvious statement to make, but it's anything but obvious to people. A lot of times we don't reward honesty, we reward good news. Now, if you reward only good news, you're going to hear more and more and more good news, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's indicative of what's really going on. But when you reward honesty, you don't just get the good news, you get some of the bad news too, but you're going to incentivize people to bring you the raw information, to filter it less. What does that sound like? Somebody comes in and they say, we just lost X amount of dollars on a purchase that we can't get a refund on. Okay, you don't crush them on the spot. You thank them for the information and you get the right people assembled to try to do some damage control. And if it was just like a plain mistake, maybe by the person that brought you the information, you're going to have to deal with that. They're not off the hook just because they brought you the truth, but they shouldn't be expecting that from you either. And it's not one and done. It's not something that you can do on Fridays when you're looking forward to the weekend. It just has to be a routine way of doing business. And it's a little bit related to what people would call like an open door policy. Open door policy doesn't mean you just walk into the CEO's office anytime you feel like it. What open door policy, really the spirit of it is, I can bring information to the leader of the organization, or maybe just the leader of our team anytime. And you want that. Okay, so let's wrap up with our 3 principles. First one is you got to realize that your authority, manager, vice president, CEO, whichever it is, you have to realize that that is changing the behavior of the people and the way they interact with you. You probably don't intend it to be that way, but it does happen. Number 2, people learn when to stay silent, so pay attention to your reactions. Whatever environment you create, the risks and rewards are going to be evaluated, and that is going to drive people to speak or remain silent. And then 3, you got to resist the distortion of the information coming your way and be proactive in going after it. And the 5 actions, the 5 things you can do differently tomorrow. Number 1, watch your reactions. Remember, calm leaders get better information. So when people bring you information, just pay attention to how you react to them. 2, reward accuracy or the truth. And the way you do that is you be cautious of the way that you reward optimistic reporting. You got to be even-keeled, balanced. Number 3, when you're discussing things with your team, ask leading questions, not yes or no. Provide people the opportunity to explain things. 4, spend your time around your people. Set an example. Lead from the front. That's what that means. Be with your people and experience their world through their eyes. Learn your job through their eyes. And then 5, normalize disagreement. And what that means is it's okay for a team to come together and have differing points of view, handle it professionally, yes, but don't encourage the opposite, which is whatever I say we're doing and don't disagree. Because the strongest teams have different perspectives considered in coming up with solutions. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this gave you a few things to think about as you move into leadership. And if you've already noticed, maybe I'm not hearing things the way that I thought I would, or things seem to be just a little bit different. These are some of the reasons why that's occurring. People are thinking about what they're going to tell you before they do. Until next time, be aware of the subtle changes, the things that could happen every time you get promoted, every time you move up in management. Thanks.